On today's show, the Hawks will not be going 82-0 this year as they go to Oklahoma City on a Sunday evening and lose in increasingly lopsided fashion. It was more close and more competitive than that throughout the game. I'll touch on all of what transpired, the takeaways, and more, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1832 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here at the end of October. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Begin the season out with a big return at FanDuel. If you're a new customer, get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify and Apple. We're on Overcast, Amazon Music, and we're also on YouTube. Please like this episode as you are watching it and subscribe on both audio and video platforms. Today's show will focus on what became a lopsided loss for the Hawks. They're not going to go undefeated this year. 128-104 at the hands of the Thunder on the road in Oklahoma City. If that's all I told you, it'd be misleading. The Hawks were very competitive in this game for 3+ quarters. The final result got out of control a little bit at the end of the game. It was a lopsided fourth quarter, and the better team won, to be fair, but the Hawks were better than this indicates, I would say. One of the headlines of this one, as we'll talk about later on, is that Zaccharie Risacher, the number 1 overall pick in the draft, got his first career start and played well, I thought, in this game. The Hawks were actually up as many as 10 points in the first half. They played quite well before halftime. They had a pretty dire stumble right before halftime. The final minute of the second quarter was pretty rough. They were still up at halftime, but by less than they probably should have been at the break. They held the line, I would say, held steady in the third quarter. They were actually up 1 early in the fourth, and then there was a 13-0 run by the Thunder early in the fourth quarter that ended up being, at least for me, the gap in this game. And then from that point forward, it was kind of over. Ended up being some garbage time at the end of the game. So, again, it was competitive, and, again, the better team won, but the Hawks were interesting in this game. There were things to highlight on both sides, offensively, defensively, positive, negative, and we'll get into all of that on the show. If you're a new listener, what we do is dive into the game from every angle that I can think of in a reasonable time span and kind of break down the overall takeaways, my observations throughout the game, and at the end of the podcast, my player-by-player evaluations. But on this game, because it was so lopsided by the end, I actually want to begin pregame in some respects because the Hawks were actually down 2 of their top 6 or 7 guys in this game, plus their projected backup point guard coming into the year. So 3 of their top 9 or 10 guys basically in this one. They only had 12 guys available. That actually included Keaton Wallace and Moge, both of whom they actually don't want to play right now. So they only had really 10 guys that they actually trust in this game. And the headliner was, unfortunately, DeAndre Hunter, who was added late to the injury report on Sunday, actually afternoon, with he was actually originally listed as questionable with right knee inflammation, and then downgraded about an hour and a half before the game to being out. John Hollinger of The Athletic, friend of the podcast, lives in Atlanta, et cetera, close to the team, heard that they were trying to be careful with Bogey, which is something I've heard as well, and might be following that same track with Hunter, but it's kind of tough to know that right now. He's had recurring issues with this knee for a long time. So as soon as you see right knee and Hunter, it's a little bit of a red flag for me. But, of course, pregame, Quinn was asked about this. He offered no details at all about Hunter. No surprise there. We'll probably know a little bit more about Hunter on Monday, simply whether he's actually going to play or not. Because there is a potential spin here where the Hawks were just being smart and managing him, and they'll play him on Monday. If that's not the case, if it's a little bit more, not necessarily serious, but more troubling and an actual injury, we'll know more. Again, I'm not trying to say it's play on Monday or it's panic time, but that could be as simple as they gave him a day off. They don't want to play him back-to-backs. And again, he's had those knee issues. He's not old, but Hunter has an old man's knee, I would say, in some respects. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I lay all that out because the Hawks are already not as good as the Thunder, respectfully. And yes, the Thunder were on a second out of a back-to-back. It's early in the year, so that's a little bit less of a tax than it will be in January or February, where teams are all tired at that point in time. But the Thunder were at home. And yes, they're injured too. They have a major injury with Isaiah Hartenstein, but still the healthier and better team in the spot. And because I say all that, our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook made the Hawks 11-point underdogs in this game. And a lot of Hawks fans were surprised when I said that on Twitter today. And I get it. It seems kind of high on a back-to-back for all that, but the Thunder are really good, number one. And the Hawks are not the same team without Bogey. And yes, without Hunter. I know Hunter is not exactly the most popular guy in Hawks fan circles, but he is a competent two-way wing player it's not easy to find those guys. And also he played very well on Friday. He was pretty good on Wednesday as well. So anyway, that's a real loss. And with that out of the way, we'll have more information hopefully on both guys, but at least one of them, hopefully something like that on Monday when the Hawks play again. Spoiler alert, about 20 hours from now, I'll be playing basketball again as I record this podcast as they host the Wizards on Monday. To the actual game, it ended up being pretty ugly on both ends by the numbers in this game, unsurprisingly. And again, they lost by 20-plus points at the end. They had a 103 offensive rating, according to the folks that clean the glass, which kind of, they try to remove garbage time. So that's a little bit more indicative of how this game went. It was much better than that for 3 quarters, but they shot 40% from the field in this game, 32% from 3, and not enough volume, honestly. That's a theme so far, is that not enough 3-point attempts for me. They took 31. That's not dire, but it's not enough, in my opinion. From there, the Hawks shot 50% at the rim in this game. That's a really, really, really bad number. And yes, Chet Holmgren's a great rim protector for the Thunder, but that's not exactly this huge front line. So you got to do more than that. Also, they did not run in this game. Something I flagged on both of the first 2 games in the season, that the Hawks were running at a very, very encouraging clip in terms of getting out and not necessarily being efficient in transition so far, but actually running. In this game, they had a 9% frequency in transition. And that is a very, very low number. So that was a little bit troubling as well. Part of that, by the way, is that they got no stops in this game and a lot less havoc creation as far as turnovers, et cetera, et cetera. The Hawks on offense, though, committed 20 turnovers that led directly to 28 points. If that's all I told you, no other context in this game, that's probably going to be a loss for the Hawks. Now, to their credit, in the first half in particular, they dominated the offensive glass, and that kind of made up for some of the turnovers. Like they were actually won the possession battle in the first half, despite a bunch of turnovers. But when that kind of slowed down a little bit, they didn't stop, but it slowed down. They lost the juice a little bit. They still ended up with 30 second chance points, which is a crazy number, but that only got you like to the baseline of back to even, basically, when you combine that with the turnovers, and then the poor shooting and the lack of transition play, et cetera, left a lot to be desired on offense. And I'll say this now and probably say it again later. The Thunder are awesome defensively. That is worth at least acknowledging here. You got to grade on a little bit of a curve, but still not great from the Hawks in this spot. We'll come back to this as well later, but Jalen Johnson was just not nearly good enough again in this game, and that kind of left the Hawks in a tough spot without Bogey and Hunter as well. You could argue those are their top 4 shot creators on the roster right now. Alone, those 3 guys and Trae Young, I should say. Trae, Jalen, Bogey, and Hunter. Trae was pretty good in this game. Jalen was not, and then Bogey and Hunter were not available. So they were, let's just say, lacking in shot creation for large portions of this game. And Trae himself was he was really good for 3 quarters, and then in the fourth, he kind of leveled off, and that was kind of the end of that. Defensively, it was also not pretty, as you might imagine, by the 128 points that the Thunder scored in this game. It was a 127 or so defensive rating. And the biggest thing, again, was the turnover battle. While the Hawks the Hawks gave away the ball 20 times in this game, they only created 10 turnovers. So they were minus 10 in turnovers. That's not going to work most nights. The Hawks have been creating a lot of havoc the first 2 games, but outside of Dyson Daniels and Risacher a little bit in this game, there was not much of that to go around. The Thunder also got to the line more than the Hawks did in this game and made more when they got there. And then also, notably, they shot 40% from 3. So the Thunder took, I believe it was 9 more threes than the Hawks, but also made 6 more. And that on the margins is going to also put you over the top more often than not if you're the opposition. And then the Hawks rebounded the ball okay defensively. That was a big problem in the first 2 games that they were able to overcome against 2 pretty middling opponents. But in this game, the Thunder are not a good rebounding team at all. And the Hawks punished them some on the offensive glass, for sure. They won that in the way that they probably should have. But the Hawks probably should have dominated the glass on defense in this game, and they were only okay, which allowed them, or maybe kept them from, I should say, being more effective on the whole defensively. So big picture, there wasn't a whole lot the Hawks did extremely well in this game. The only thing that I would say they were elite at was the offensive rebounding in this game, but too many giveaways. They ended up with, I believe, 20 in the game that led to so many points. And then once you do that and you're not getting stops, it becomes this feedback loop. And by the end, again, this is a game I would encourage you to watch it. It was very competitive. It was actually quite entertaining for 3 quarters, maybe 3.25 quarters. And then once that 13-0 run hit by the Thunder, it was all over from there and garbage time at the end. But anyway, the Hawks lost to a better team on this night. And look, coming into the year, as we'll talk about probably at the end of this podcast again, the Hawks have this 5-game stretch to open the year where they're going to be favored in 4 of the first 5 games, barring something weird. And tonight was the game that they're not going to be favored in. Again, if you're an 11-point underdog in the NBA, you can win, but you're not supposed to win. And the Hawks didn't win this game, and we'll come back to that more in detail in a second. However, before we get to that, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and get ready to tackle the NFL, NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is so easy to use as well. Gives you all stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, and it's all in one place. They have everything you're looking for, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, future bets, same-game parlays, live betting, and so much more. The FanDuel app is safe. It's secure. They cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, of course. They have the NFL, college football, MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And now is a great time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started and get $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, at the outset of this game, the headliner, again, as I said before, was Risacher's first start. The Thunder played quite small, generally speaking, and that was notable as well as the Hawks put together their lineups in this game. But the Hawks are really big on the wing. And this is not a new thing if you've been paying attention closely the last few months. But you throw Risacher out there at the 3 at his length and his size, plus Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, you're pretty rangy on the perimeter. To open the game, the Hawks, of course, had Dyson on Shea. And it's going to sound crazy if you didn't watch this game, but Shea had 35, and I thought Dyson did a really good job on him. As crazy as that is, Shea's very good. Beyond that, it was Risacher on Jalen Williams, a tough spot for a rookie to be in. He did a pretty good job, I thought, overall on him. And then Jalen was guarding Lou Dort at the outset of this game. I think both teams were really high pressure defensively to open the game. A lot of energy defensively, which I very much enjoyed, honestly. Lou Dort was covering Trae like 90 feet, basically. The Thunder, again, are great defensively, and it showed early on in the way that they were kind of not letting the Hawks initiate their sets. Even Trae was being crowded up on. Later in the game, Case and Wallace was really bothering Trae, and like most guys can't bother Trae. And they have, I would say, with Dort and with Wallace, that's 2 of the probably 10 best, and Caruso, sure. They have 3 of probably the 10 or 15 best perimeter defenders in the league, like on-ball guys, between Caruso, Wallace, and Dort. And that's tough for anybody, even Trae Young. So the Hawks opened actually 3 of 10 from the field in this game, but all 3 makes were threes. So they were actually able to be leading the game at that point in time. They didn't have a 2-point field goal for like 5 minutes until Jalen finally scored. The Hawks were actually up at the first time out, though, and Trae and Jalen had the first 11 points for the Hawks. Jalen slowed down a lot after that. Trae didn't until probably the end of the game, I would say. Risacher was very good, I thought, early on. There was a putback that he got, actually kind of a high-pointed offensive rebound that was pretty encouraging. He had a nice drive and finish at the bucket, and then got to the line a couple times in encouraging fashion in this game, I would say. Rotationally, it wasn't a surprise given who was available. So there's a reason why I led with the Hawks not having Bogey and Hunter in this game. It led to some pretty interesting choices. And I tweeted about this during the game as well, if you follow me on social media. But Quinn Snyder's kind of doing a delicate balance right now overall. Number one, you're playing without 2 key guys and really a third with Bogdan as well. It's also a first night of a back-to-back as the Hawks play again tomorrow. So you don't want to lead on guys too heavily. And then it's October. And I know every game means the same in the NBA. I'll probably preach that. They probably don't mean as much as you think they do, game to game to game. But you don't want to like blow anybody's, you don't want to go overboard, let's say. Like Trae Young probably played more than they wanted him to in those first 2 games, for example. Trae played 37 minutes tonight on a back-to-back. Like they probably don't want to do that in October, but they kind of had to, at least in some respects. So that's what I wanted to sort of lead with. And there's some decisions they have to make. So coming into the day, I thought for sure they were going to have to play at least one of David Roddy or Larry Nance. It ended up being David Roddy. So he came in at the 4 for Jalen. The short example of why people ask this question is that Roddy is much more of a forward than Larry Nance is. Yes, Larry Nance can play the 4. I've been saying that all summer long. I still believe it. But as I've also said, he's more of a center. And the Hawks believe that he is more of a center. And against a team like Oklahoma City, who are playing 4 out or 5 out at all times. Like they don't play a traditional center. Chet Holmgren is a center on defense, but Chet Holmgren is a 5-out spacer. Like this is the worst matchup possible to be playing Nance at the 4. So they chose to play Roddy, which made sense to me. But it's not that Roddy's better than Nance. He's not. But just skill set wise, it makes more sense. And I know it's weird. Larry Nance should be playing. It's just that he can't because they have 3 centers. Anyway, I thought Roddy was really good on offense in this one. Defensively, we'll come back to that later on, but he was not particularly awesome. But offensively, he had a nice little stretch at the outset. Okongwu came in his normal spot, played, I believe, as much as Capella. Yeah, about 22 minutes each for those guys, 23 minutes for Okongwu. That made some sense in this game. It was Vit Krejci and Garrison Matthews. That was the 9-man rotation for Atlanta by the end. Mo Gay and Keaton Wallace got in at the very, very end of the game. Actually, I was happy about this. I'll say it now. Keaton Wallace is the brother of Kaysen Wallace, and the Hawks were able to play him in his NBA debut tonight. Now, Keaton's actually older than Kaysen, but isn't the prospect Kaysen was. Look, the Hawks lost this game by a lot of points, but I was happy that there was enough time to get Keaton in the game, especially because he was playing against his brother. That was a cool thing. I understand it doesn't matter, quote unquote, in the grand scheme of things, but that was a cool moment at the very end of this contest. Anyway, Vit Krejci actually had the lead defensive assignment on Jalen Williams at one point because Shea was basically mirrored by Dyson in the competitive portion of this game. Every time that Shea came in, Dyson was right there to follow him. So it was basically that matchup, and then whoever was guarding Jalen Williams between Vit and Risacher, etc. I thought it was pretty funny, actually. The first time Shea checked in, Quinn, I'm talking about immediately turned and got Dyson through him in the game. So that was planned, let's say. There was actually a huge block by Jalen Johnson, who wasn't great in this game, but he had a massive block on Isaiah Joe, just flatly kind of annihilating him at the rim. The Hawks were actually up by 4 points in the first quarter, despite 8 turnovers, because they dominated the glass again, as I said before. Early on in the second, it was a little bit bumpy, I would say, without Trae on the court. They were only -1, though, and you're going to have to take that, basically, in about 6 minutes of play without Trae in the first half. Jalen missed a pretty obviously, it would have been a big dunk, let's say, but it's when he normally makes. He's been a little bit shaky, of course. Trae was really good when he checked back in. He set up a 3 for Roddy, finished a floater. The two-way Trae thing was back in this game for large portions of it. The Hawks actually had a nice 9-0 run at mid-quarter to go up by 9 points, where Trae had 7 of the 9 points in that run. And then Risacher had this play where it appeared to be an awesome block by Risacher on Jalen Williams. The replay showed it actually wasn't a block, but he did get up there and contest it. And it was pretty impressive just to see him close from kind of behind Williams, extend his arms, and Risacher is so long. And also he feels so good defensively that I'm very intrigued about the way that's going to be in the future. Foul trouble, though. Jalen had foul trouble the entire game. And then I know I said it earlier, but the Hawks had 2 dire stretches in this game. One was the fourth quarter, where they allowed a 13-0 run, the end of the game, basically. The first one, though, was the final 40 seconds of the first half. And lots of Hawks fans from last year and previous years will remember this. The Hawks had some issues closing quarters last year and the year before. This happened again here. So they're up 8 with about a minute to go, or less, actually, in the first half. They allowed a 3 to Holmgren. That's going to happen, whatever. Then an offensive foul, and then Okongwu commits a 3-shot foul. Holmgren makes the first 2, misses the third one. They get the rebound, and then they get a layup at the end of the buzzer. So they score 7 points, the Thunder do, in about 35 seconds, and the Hawks didn't score any. And suddenly the 8-point lead is down to 1 at halftime. And again, they had 18 second chance points in the first half, and they're up by 1. That's probably not a great sign, which I was thinking going into halftime, they kind of gave this one away a little bit. Just for reference for second chance points, last year's league leader in second chance points averaged fewer than 17 per game. And the Hawks had 18 in the first half, and they were only up by 1, which is, again, kind of foreshadowing what was going to be coming. The Thunder opened up the third quarter on an 11-4 run, so it was basically an 18-4 overall run by OKC from the end of the first half to the beginning of the second half, and the Hawks were down by 6 at that point in time. To their credit, the Hawks battled in the third quarter. Risacher had a nice putback after a nice streaking offensive rebound in the middle of the quarter. Dyson had a great, brilliant, spin move finish in the middle of the quarter. They were down 8 with 5 minutes to go in the quarter. Then Garrison hit a 3. Trae got a steal. Vit hit a 3. It was an 11-2 run by the Hawks to take the lead, actually, when Garrison hit another 3. And they were right there. So the Hawks they could have teetered then, and they didn't, which I thought was actually kind of impressive in the third quarter. And Dyson actually just turned the water off on Shea a couple times. It was impressive. Early in the fourth, they were still playing pretty well. Clint had 2, I think, genuinely awesome offensive rebounds, including one that he grabbed over 2 guys to create a bucket for Dyson. That was a fun moment. And then they go to Okongwu. They're still in the game. They're down by 5. It made sense to go smaller. They played Okongwu more in the crunch time situations because the Thunder, again, are so small and more athletic. And, other than foul trouble, it is what it is. But, Trae kind of puttered out a little bit. Wallace bothered him, I would say, in the fourth quarter. There was actually a huge block by Dyson Daniels in transition. And it was an awesome, awesome play. But it actually led to a 3. And that put the Hawks down by 10. The Thunder then scored again after a timeout. It was a 13-0 run in about 3.5 minutes. And the Hawks went from up by 1 to down by 12. And it wasn't over then, legally speaking, it wasn't over, but it felt over. That was probably the end of the game, realistically. After that, kind of break, the run never came. The Hawks had to have one more big run in them to have any chance at all, and it just never materialized. Chet had a big dunk for OKC, and then Shea hit a pretty big three to kind of really put the final dagger in, I would say, for Atlanta. This is a long-time bother spot for me, but Quinn does this thing where he leaves starters in longer than he probably should. And this is a prime example. So there was like 4 minutes left. The game was pretty much over, back-to-back tomorrow, and Quinn's got Trae out there and other guys out there, and it's like, what's going on here? Finally, they take a timeout and get Keaton and Moge into the game. But yeah, that was it's just a little bit painful. It wasn't the worst it's ever been. There have been times where I've just been pulling my hair out. It wasn't tonight, but if you're a longtime listener, you will know Quinn does not usually pull the ripcord as fast as I want him to, especially again at back-to-back with travel tomorrow and a game that they probably need to win against Washington. Be careful, I would say. They just don't like to do that. But yeah, the bottom fell out in the fourth quarter. I'll leave it there for now, but I'll just say this. Yes, there were several minutes of garbage time in the fourth, but the Hawks scored 18 points on 6 of 20 shooting with 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. That's kind of your game in some respects. And now defensively too, like they had issues there too, but the Thunder are awesome. And I think it was my friend Andrew Kelly. Somebody said this at some point tonight, but it was basically like, this is a good learning moment for the Hawks in some respects because they're playing a team that many believe is a legitimate title contender. Like they're picked to win the West by several people, and you're in a close game, and they just kind of turn it up a little bit, and the Hawks didn't have anything to go to. And again, there's personal reasons for that. No Bogey, no Hunter, that stuff matters, but the Thunder were just way better when it mattered in this game, and maybe that will be a little bit of a reminder of where the Hawks kind of are in the pecking order. And look, I'm higher on the Hawks than most. I think this is going to be a good team this year, but the Thunder are probably a tier or two ahead of Atlanta. Nothing wrong with that, just kind of what happened in the fourth quarter of this game, and plenty more to come as we go into Monday, Wednesday, etc. In fact, we'll dive in a little bit, tiny bit, to what's going to happen tomorrow between the Hawks and the Wizards. But first, we'll dive in also to the player-by-player stuff on the podcast. In the middle of that, though, a word from our partners on the pod. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. And this is a podcast about basketball, of course, but you've actually been to a hockey game. You don't have to have me tell you this, but it's really awesome. It brings a sensory experience to the table. And at Gametime, you get tickets for all kinds of sporting events, including basketball games and hockey games, football games, baseball games, etc., plus tickets for music, comedy, and theater as well. And they also have this awesome feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets even easier and better for you to see your favorite teams play live in person. They filter out all the stuff that you actually don't want and show you the incredible deals on great tickets they actually have across the Gametime app, honestly. And for example, there are awesome deals right now for the Hawks game on Friday at home against the Kings. It's a big one for the Hawks, including a pair of tickets for $29 each, including fees at Gametime right now on a Friday in Atlanta. That's an awesome deal. There's more of that happening all the time at Gametime. I love the feature. Actually, turn on the all-in pricing to show you all of the pricing up front, so no surprise fees at the checkout screen. Plus, they have the lowest possible price guaranteed at Gametime. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the Gametime app. Download the app right now. It's Gametime. Create an account and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account at Gametime and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app. What time is it? It's Gametime. All right, to the player-by-player stuff in this game, and it wasn't terribly pretty. We'll go to the bench as we usually do first. Wallace scored. That was good to see on his debut in 3 minutes. Moge scored as well, had actually a nice dunk, I believe. Vít Krejci was okay-ish. 5 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal for Vít in 20 minutes of play. He played a little bit with Trae. He also was the backup point guard again. That kind of left the Hawks where they are. Vít's not the best role for him right now. I think he probably is going to thrive the most when he was kind of the fifth guy on offense as a ball mover, cutter, etc. And right now he's got a lot of on-ball responsibilities. Not his best role, I would say. Garrison played well on offense. 14 points, hit 4 threes, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 rebounds. Actually, I talked about this with someone online during the game. The Hawks want Garrison to shoot as much as he wants, basically as much as he can. That is his number one, by far, NBA skill. And yeah, he took a couple in this game that were, I would say, aggressive. They weren't bad shots, just aggressive shots, and the Hawks want that from him. Garrison taking 8 threes in 22 minutes is very normal. He'll bomb away. He made 4 of them. That's where he adds his value. Defensively, it was kind of rough, and that's what you're going to get from Garrison sometimes. But I thought he was okay, given the threes and all that. David Roddy, 10 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. The first half, Roddy was great on offense. He really was. And that's one of the reminders, if you watched him in college or even watched him in Memphis, like he's got a really nice skill set. He's obviously the big body Roddy nickname tells it all. He's a big, thick guy, but he is a skilled offensive player. Good passer, good feel, good touch, all those things. The problem is defense with David Roddy. it was not like he's terrible. He's a decent supporting defender, but he's not necessarily a guy who's the most active off the ball, and they're kind of small. They're less athletic with him on the floor in this game. It's out of necessity, but that difference was felt. Even when Jalen's not played his best, as we'll talk about in a second, his defense coming off the court for Roddy to be on the court was a big drop off, and you kind of felt that both times. I think he played 3 stints, all 3 stints. It was kind of rough. Okongwu was not his best. 14 points, 3 rebounds, had assist and a steal, but was actually 3 of 9 from the floor in this one, including 2 of 7 on twos. He got the line 9 times. That's actually really good for Okongwu, but he was not very impactful defensively or offensively in this game. He was awesome on Wednesday in the opener, a little bit less awesome on Friday. He was still pretty good, and then tonight was his worst game of the 3 so far. To the starters, Clint Capella. A mixed bag game for Clint, 6 points, 10 rebounds in 22 minutes. Obviously, the rebounding was impressive. Had a steal, had a block, had 2 assists, but was not a good finisher, especially in the first half. I think he was 0-4 from the floor at the beginning of this game. Even I, as the Capella defender, he missed a couple that were you got to make those shots. It is what it is. He was better as the game went along, and I think he got too much heat in this game, as usual, from certain people and fans and all that stuff. But it's a bad matchup for Clint. I was actually going through the box scores and kind of looking at the standings to see, is there a worse matchup on paper for Capella in 2024? And I think the answer is no, than the Thunder. Because the Thunder are a true 5-out team, and Clint, in his current state, is much more suited to playing near the basket, obviously. And his passes come a long way on offense, etc. But I would have, and I said this yesterday, so it's not like it's not looking backwards. So I said this proactively. I would have considered, if I was Quinn, and maybe they thought about this and they just couldn't do it because everybody else was out. I would have thought about resting Clint today, playing Larry Nance, having a guy Larry Nance is the best third center in the league by far, sitting Clint proactively, giving him a day off, having him fresh for tomorrow, and having Larry have a chance to play against a team that was small and athletic and all that stuff. They didn't do that. I don't know if that was ever thought about, but there's a reason for that. It's not that Clint's bad. In fact, I always tell you that he's not bad. He's a very useful player in a way that people don't necessarily always understand, but this is not a good matchup for him. And obviously, I thought he was okay in this game, but he is limited, and that kind of showed along the way. Elsewhere, Jalen Johnson. It's been 3 games. Jalen Johnson is not playing well. And people were, everybody's got a theory about this. Everyone's asking me, is it because of the contract? Is he doesn't care anymore? Is he pressing? He is pressing, I think. That's fair. What I don't think is even reasonable is he got paid, so now he doesn't care. That's a very silly thing. These guys are professional human beings. He cares. He's not playing well, though. And that is just worth talking about. He's not, he's kind of mixing between overly aggressive and not aggressive enough in the worst ways, I would say. He's also missing shots that he usually makes. He was actually 2 of 10 on twos in this game. And at least 3 or 4 of those are shots that he almost always makes, at the rim. Processing wise, not his best. He's not attacking when he should be attacking. He's attacking when he shouldn't be attacking, that kind of back and forth. Defensively, he's been not his normal self, I would say. He's still there on the help side stuff. He had a big block in this game, but just not playing well, not playing aggressively. The next question is, am I worried? No, I'm not. I'm not worried. It's 3 games. We saw so much from him last year. He's not hurt right now. It's not a physical thing. I think he'll be just fine, but he's got to be better. That's the thing. The Hawks were able to win the first 2 games without him playing well, which was nice. But if you're playing a real team, this is just the reality. If you're playing a real team like OKC, even if Trae's awesome, you need a second guy. And yes, there was more pressure even tonight on Jalen without Bogey, without Hunter, but he didn't have it. And that's going to be a problem because, as much as I love Dyson Daniels, and I do love Dyson Daniels, he's not a shot creator for himself. Risacher can do a little bit of that, but he's a 19-year-old rookie. Clint Capella is not a shot creator. Okongwu can be, but not a throw the ball to him and get out of the way kind of guy necessarily. So, you look at all the guys who played tonight, who's supposed to create shots other than Trae if it's not Jalen? And Jalen didn't have it. And that left the Hawks with some issues on offense. And that was kind of, again, not all on Jalen, but for 3 games, he's had 3 bad ones. He's not played well in any of the 3 games, and hopefully he bounces back as soon as Monday. Risacher was good, I think, honestly, in this game. 13 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. I think defensively, he was impressive, especially in the first half. Really using his length well, really feeling the game well. If you didn't know how old he was, you would not know it by watching him. And for me, that's a huge compliment. I think Risacher feels the game at a level that's not a rookie, which I am really impressed by. He still makes some mistakes, he's not perfect by any means, but he was efficient enough in this game. He scored when he needed to score. He rebounded better than he had been in the previous 2 games. I thought he looked good. So that's encouraging to see. In fact, that's probably the number one positive from this game is that he looked the part. Like he looked good. Dyson, 7 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, steal and a block, good defensively. But this is his worst game of the 3 so far because offensively it does kind of show. And this is one of the not worries about Dyson Daniels, but he's not a proven offensive player yet. And we saw in this game. So he missed his first 4 threes in this one. And he got a little bit gun shy, not totally gun shy, but a little bit. And I know Quinn wants him to keep shooting, but he's an unproven shooter. There is more to life than only 3-point shooting. That he can do other things. He's a great cutter. He's a good passer, all those things. But he got a little bit conservative, which you don't want him to have in the future. So offensively, he was still like not a disaster. But that's worth noting that that's one of the concerns, at least mildly, with Dyson. And defensively, he was still quite good. But there you go. And then Trae, 24 points, 8 assists. Totally fine there, obviously. 10 turnovers. That is tough. I think he might have had 3 or 4 in the fourth quarter. That he's going to have turnovers. I always make that point. Like the best players in the league always lead the league in turnovers. So I don't really worry about that. But 10 is obviously something you can't live with. So that is notable. I'm sure he would admit that. Probably already has as I'm recording this podcast. At the same time, part of the issue again is that they only have one ball handler right now, and everyone's calling. And I'm not blaming you for this. Everyone's calling for trading for whatever a second ball handler. I get it, but it's also not easy to make a trade in October for a ball handler. So, could they turn Larry Nance into a point guard right now? Like that'd be helpful. But if that deal was out there, they probably would have already made it. And yeah, they're supposed to have Kobe Buffkin, who they used a first round pick on 20 months ago, not even 20 months, 16 months ago, to be in that position. He's just hurt right now. So it's not great. That's their one spot right now. They don't really have a second guy, but Trae's going to have nights where he was awesome. The first 2 games he was awesome. Tonight he was good for 2.5, 3 quarters. He really was. And the fourth he was not very good, but I don't think he wasn't the problem in this game. I know he had a lot of turnovers. He was not the problem at all in this one on offense, and we'll leave it there for now. All right. A lot of words said on a game that was really entertaining and really well played for about 3 quarters, and then it got really ugly, but that's okay. From here, the Hawks play their first back-to-back of the season. They are headed home probably as I speak right now to face the Wizards on Monday. The Wizards are not good at basketball. They're 0-2. They were blown out in both games. They probably, in my mind, are the worst team in the league. I think they were tied for the last over-under win total. They are not going to be good this year. The Hawks also play them again in DC on Wednesday, so it's not a series, but they play them back-to-back games in 3 days, one in Atlanta and then one in DC. But I say all that, nothing is assured in the NBA. I always, on either side, on the positive side or the negative side, nothing is assured in the NBA. You never know what's going to happen. As I am recording this podcast, I just checked on Sunday evening, the Hawks are 7.5-point favorites at FanDuel. Even with injuries, even with the travel situation, that actually Washington was off today, so an advantage for the Wizards there. The Hawks are still favored by 7.5 points, which kind of tells you how bad they are projected to be. Now, we'll see who plays. Obviously, Hunter is the biggest thing, followed by Bogey in some order. Could the Hawks rest another guy? Could they rest Clint tomorrow? I have no idea. Maybe they will. It's the first back-to-back. You don't want to put too much on it, but how they handle this personnel-wise, if you're a Hawks fan, you're hoping beyond hope that you see Hunter and Bogey play tomorrow, because that means they were just taking the day off and kind of taking it easy. And that will, I'm sure, frustrate some people. But overall, that's better than having an injury you're worried about. So keep an eye on that. I'll have a podcast after the game, as I always do. And that one, I'll be in the building for that one as well. So that's all I have on the game today. One more PSA. I said this on last night's show and the one before that, but just in case people were still missing it, I'm still getting questions about this today. If you are an audio subscriber, so on Apple or Spotify or Overcast, etc., you will see extra episodes in the podcast feed after games. They come from the Locked On Sports Atlanta crew. They're called the Postcast. They're labeled as the Postcast, so you'll know which one is which. That does not have me on it. It's not. There's no less of me. I still do my usual thing. But if you want extra content, it's there for you. It's from the network, and they have their own YouTube feed, but they kind of share the podcast feed with me. So that's why that's there. Also, another PSA: we have a newsletter at Locked On Hawks. It can be delivered right to your inbox, and you can sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. That comes from me and others. There's a national component. There's a fantasy basketball component. I do a little bit for that as well. All that's there. Newsletter, it's free. Lockedondaily.com. And also, please subscribe to this podcast, anywhere you find your podcast. I said that actually on Twitter today, but last week was the biggest week in the history of the podcast that did not include like an emergency trade or something like that, like a normal quote unquote week. So I appreciate all the support. Please keep it going. I definitely appreciate that already proactively. But subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends. Check us out on Apple and Spotify. And please check us out on YouTube as well. Like the episodes as you're watching them. Subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Share it with your friends. Post on social media. Post on Reddit. All that stuff. I appreciate everyone for listening to the podcast. Also follow us on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland, and follow my Patreon work, which is all my non-podcast stuff on the Hawks, is patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thanks much, everybody. I definitely appreciate that. Enjoy your Monday, and I'll be back in about 22 hours with much more on the Hawks, so stay tuned. We'll see you all next time.